Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of the ship. Stars filled the darkness ahead. But one thing was different. A massive space station floated in the distance, bigger than any city he had ever seen. Lights blinked across its surface, like jewels scattered on black cloth. "First time seeing the Nexus hub?" asked Captain Amy Rodriguez as she walked up behind him. Jake nodded. "It's huge. How many people live there?" "About 2 million from 50 different species," the captain said. "It's a neutral zone. No fighting. Allowed. Perfect place for meetings like this one." Jake picked up his translation device and checked it one more time. As the ship's language expert, he would be the first human to talk with two very important alien races. His hands shook a little. 3 years of studying their languages felt like nothing now. The ship Starbound moved slowly toward the docking bay. Through the speakers, Jake heard the docking control speaking in the common trade language. Even that sounded musical and strange. "Remember," Captain Rodriguez said, "we need those mining rights. The Nexium crystals in this sector could power our ships for the next 100 years. But we have to play nice with the elves and the Vexhi." Jake knew the basics. The elves called themselves the Silverleaf Consortium. They were old, very old, and they controlled this part of space for thousands of years. The Vexhi Empire was newer but had powerful technology and weapons. Humans were the youngest of the three, and they needed allies. The docking process took an hour. Jake used the time to practice speaking Elven phrases. The words felt strange in his mouth, full of soft sounds and long vowels. Vexhi was harder, with clicking noises and harmonic tones that hurt his throat. When the doors opened, Jake followed Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Kira Voss into the station. The gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, and the air smelled like flowers and metal. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. "Welcome to Nexus Hub," said a voice. Jake turned and saw his first alien. The creature looked like a tall, thin person covered in blue scales. Its eyes were huge and black. "I am Guide Nexel. I will take you to the meeting hall." They walked through corridors filled with beings Jake had only seen in pictures. Some looked almost human, but with extra arms or different-colored skin. Others were so strange he could not figure out which end was the head. The guide led them past shops, restaurants, and gardens that defied gravity. "There," Guide Nexel pointed ahead. "The diplomatic sector." The meeting hall was enormous. A round table sat in the center, big enough for 30 people. But only 2 groups were already there. On the left side sat the elves. Jake recognized them from his studies, but seeing them in person was different. They were tall and graceful, with pointed ears and pale skin that seemed to glow. Their clothes looked like they were made from silver threads and starlight. At their head sat a woman with long white hair and eyes like green gems. On the right side were the Vexhi. Their bodies looked like they were made of living crystal, with geometric patterns that shifted and changed color. The largest one had sharp angles for a face and patterns that glowed bright blue. When it moved, Jake heard a sound like wind chimes. "The humans have arrived," Guide Nexel announced. The elf woman stood up. When she moved, it was like watching water flow. She was beautiful in a way that made Jake forget how to breathe for a moment. "Welcome," she said in perfect English. Her voice was like music. "I am Lyra Lay Moonwhisper, speaker for the Silverleaf Consortium. We have waited to meet the young species that travels so far from their sun." The large Vexhi also stood. Its patterns shifted to yellow and orange. "I am Commander Zara 9 of the Vexhi 5th Fleet. Your reputation as traders and explorers has reached even our distant worlds." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "I am Captain Amy Rodriguez of the Earthship Starbound. This is Dr. Kira Voss, our science officer, and Jake Morrison, our cultural specialist." Jake tried to bow the way he had learned from his studies. "It is an honor to meet both of your peoples," he said in his careful Elven. Lyrelay smiled and Jake felt his heart skip. Then she laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Your pronunciation is terrible, human, but amusing." Heat rushed to Jake's face. 3 years of study, and she was laughing at him. Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted to what Jake thought might be amusement. "The human attempts the flower language," she said in her clicking speech. "Brave, if not skillful. I apologize." Jake said in English. I'm still learning. No need for apology, Lyrelai said, still smiling. Your effort shows respect. Few species even try to learn our tongue. Please let us sit and talk. They took their places at the great table. Guide Nexel placed a small device in the center that would translate for anyone who needed it. Now, Captain Rodriguez began, about the Nexium mining rights. Patience, Lyrelai said, raising one elegant hand. First, we must understand each other. The Vex High value efficiency and logic. We elves value tradition and harmony. What do humans value? Jake looked at his captain, who nodded for him to answer. We value learning, growing, finding new ways to solve old problems. Commander Zara 9's patterns brightened. Adaptation. This is why you spread so quickly through space. Yes, Jake said, gaining confidence. We might not be the oldest or strongest, but we try to understand everyone we meet. Lyrelai leaned forward. Understanding. That is rare among the young races. For the next several hours, they talked about their peoples, their needs, and their fears. Jake found himself fascinated by both species. The elves spoke of thousand-year plans and ancient wisdom. The Vex High discussed quantum calculations and military strategies, but both seemed curious about human ways. Your people are strange, Lyrelai said to Jake during a break. You live such short lives, yet you reach for the stars with such passion. Maybe because our time is short, Jake replied. We have to make it count. She studied him with those green eyes. Wisdom can come from unexpected places. As the day ended, they had talked about many things, but made little progress on the mining rights. Each species had different ideas about how to extract the Nexium crystals without damaging the local space. Tomorrow we will discuss the technical details, Commander Zara 9 announced. Tonight, we rest. As they prepared to leave, Lyrelai approached. Jake. You surprise me, human. Most species see us as just another resource to exploit or obstacle to overcome. You actually listen. There's always something to learn, Jake said. She smiled again. Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all. Walking back to their ship, Dr. Voss shook her head. She's playing with you, Jake. Don't get distracted from our mission. But Jake couldn't stop thinking about Lyrelai's smile and the way Commander Zara 9's patterns had warmed when they talked about discovery. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he felt like they had made real progress toward understanding each other. Outside his small cabin window, the Nexus hub continued to glow against the stars, a beacon of hope in the darkness of space. Jake woke early the next morning. His dreams had been full of silver voices and crystal lights. He checked his notes one more time, then headed to the meeting hall. The second day of talks did not go well. The three species could not agree on anything. The elves wanted to mine the Nexium crystals slowly, taking only what they needed and leaving the rest untouched. The Vex High wanted to extract everything quickly and efficiently. The humans needed enough crystals to power their growing fleet, but didn't want to anger either of their potential allies. Your methods would take decades, Commander Zara 9 said, her patterns flashing red. We need results now, and your methods would destroy the crystal formations forever, Lyrelai replied calmly. Some things should not be rushed. Captain Rodriguez looked tired. Surely we can find a middle path. Take what we need, but preserve what we can. Jake spent the morning listening and taking notes. He noticed things the others missed. When Lyrelai was frustrated, she tapped her fingers in a pattern. When Commander Zara 9 was thinking hard, her crystal body grew brighter. These were the kinds of details that could make or break negotiations. During lunch break, Jake found himself eating with both Lyrelai and Commander Zara 9. The station's dining hall served food from dozens of worlds. Jake tried something that looked like purple rice but tasted like oranges. Your people confuse me, Lyrelai said to Jake. You claim to want partnership, but your captain speaks only of human needs. She has a job to do, Jake replied. But I think you're right. We should think about everyone's needs. Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted to blue-green. Cooperation. Over competition. An interesting concept for a species so young. Maybe being young helps, Jake said. We don't have old hatreds or ancient grudges. Lyrelai laughed. Speak for yourself, human. Your history books tell of wars over land, resources, and beliefs. Jake's face grew warm. True, but we learned from those mistakes, mostly. Learning from mistakes, Commander Zara 9 clicked. My people value this trait. We call it adaptive optimization. They talked for another hour about their different cultures. Jake learned that elves lived for thousands of years, which made them think about the long-term effects of everything. The HFY lived only about as long as humans, but they thought faster, making millions of calculations every minute. It must be lonely, Jake said to Lyrelai, watching shorter-lived species come and go. Something changed in her green eyes. Yes, she said quietly. It can be. The afternoon session was worse than the morning. All three sides seemed to be getting further apart instead of closer together. Dr. Voss presented human mining technology. Commander Zara 9 showed holographic models of HFY extraction methods. Lyrelai spoke of elven harmony principles that went back 10,000 years. This is pointless, Dr. Voss whispered to Jake. They'll never agree. Jake was starting to think she was right when Lyrelai surprised everyone. She stood up during a heated exchange between the captain and Commander Zara 9. Enough, she said. Her voice was still musical, but it carried authority that made everyone stop talking. We are acting like children fighting over toys. She walked around the table, her silver robes flowing behind her. We all claim to be civilized, yet we cannot share resources on a few dead rocks floating in space. Commander Zara 9's patterns dimmed. The crystals are finite. Someone must go without. Only if we think like traders instead of partners, Lyrelai said. She stopped in front of Jake. You spoke of learning and growing. What have you learned from watching us today? Jake felt everyone's eyes on him. His mouth was dry, but he tried to answer honestly. I learned that we're all afraid. The elves are afraid of losing their traditions. The HFY are afraid of missing opportunities. Humans are afraid of being left behind. Fear, Lyrelai repeated. Yes, fear makes us small and selfish, she returned to her seat, but she didn't sit down. Instead, she looked directly at Jake with those green eyes that seemed to see right through him. You humans claim to be clever. You say you can adapt and learn. Here is a test of that claim. She paused, and the room grew completely quiet. Guess my true name, Jake Morrison. Not this diplomatic title I wear, but my real name, the one given to me at birth and earned through centuries of living. Guess it correctly, and I will marry you. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Dr. Voss dropped her datapad. Captain Rodriguez stared with her mouth open. Even Commander Zara 9's pattern stopped shifting for a moment. Did she just, Dr. Voss started to say. Propose marriage, Jake finished. I think so. Lyrelai smiled, but it wasn't the kind smile from before. This was challenging, almost predatory. In elven culture, knowing someone's true name means knowing their deepest self. It grants power over them, but also responsibility for them. Many have tried to guess mine over the past 2 centuries. All have failed. Commander Zara 9's body suddenly flashed with rapid color changes. Jake realized she was laughing. Impossible, she clicked in her harmonic voice. Even we HFY, with our quantum computational abilities, cannot crack elven name magic. Their names are mathematical equations describing the soul itself. Mathematics, Jake repeated. His mind started racing. Like a formula. More complex. Than your human mathematics could handle, Lyrelai said. But please, attempt it if you wish. I could use the entertainment. Jake looked around the room. Everyone was watching him. Dr. Voss was shaking her head as if telling him not to be stupid. Captain Rodriguez looked worried about the diplomatic implications. Commander Zara 9 seemed genuinely curious about what he would do. But when Jake looked at Lyrelai, he saw something else in her eyes, not just challenge or amusement. Something that looked almost like hope. Why? He asked. Why offer this challenge? Lyrelai's smile faltered for just a moment. Because I am tired of being seen as a prize to be won, or an obstacle to be overcome. If someone could truly know me, Perhaps they would see me as a person instead. Jake understood then. She wasn't being cruel or showing off. She was lonely, and this was her way of testing whether anyone could care enough to really understand her. "I accept," Jake said. Dr. Voss groaned. Captain Rodriguez buried her face in her hands. Commander Zara 9's patterns brightened with what Jake was learning meant excitement. "Excellent," Lirelei said, and now her smile was warm again. "You have until the negotiations end, 3 days from now. Fail, and you return to your ship with nothing but embarrassment. Succeed." She paused. "Well, I suppose we shall see." "What? About the mining rights?" Captain Rodriguez asked weakly. "Oh, those!" Lirelei waved a hand. "Perhaps Jake's quest will teach us all something about cooperation. After all, solving impossible puzzles requires understanding different perspectives." Commander Zara 9 moved closer to Jake. "Human, this is fascinating. I have studied Elven, naming conventions for decades. Would you accept Vex High assistance in your quest?" "Why would you help me?" Jake asked. "Because," her patterns shifted to warm gold, "your approach to problems intrigues me. You see connections where others see only obstacles. This could be educational." As they prepared to leave for the day, Jake felt overwhelmed. He had somehow gone from translator to suitor in the space of a few hours. The fate of the negotiations might now depend on his ability to solve a puzzle that had stumped people for centuries. But when he looked at Lirelei one more time, he saw her watching him with those green eyes. Not mocking or superior now, but curious, as if she genuinely wanted to know what he would do next. "One question," Jake said as they reached the door. "Do I get any clues?" Lirelei tilted her head. "I have been giving you clues since the moment we met. You just need to learn how to see them." Walking back to the ship, Jake's head spun with questions. How do you guess someone's true name when you've known them for 2 days? What kind of mathematics could describe a person's soul? And why did Commander Zara 9 seem so interested in helping him? Dr. Voss shook her head. "You've lost your mind, Jake. This is exactly the kind of distraction we can't afford." But Jake barely heard her. His mind was already working on the puzzle, turning over every word Lirelei had spoken, every gesture she had made. Somewhere in those interactions was the key to understanding who she really was. He had 3 days to figure out the impossible. Somehow, that felt like exactly the kind of challenge a human should take on. Jake spent the entire night reading everything he could find about Elven names. The ship's computer had files on Elven culture, but most of it was basic information. True names were mentioned only briefly as personal identifiers of great cultural significance. When morning came, Jake's eyes burned from staring at screens, but he had learned a few important things. Elven names weren't just words. They were made of sounds that matched the person's life story, personality, and even their genetic pattern. Each syllable meant something specific. Dr. Voss found him in the ship's library, surrounded by datapads and empty coffee cups. "You look terrible," she said, sitting down across from him. "Thanks," Jake muttered, not looking up from his notes. "Did you know that Elven names change throughout their lives? They add new parts when something important happens." "Jake, listen to me." Dr. Voss leaned forward. "This is crazy. You're chasing an impossible dream instead of focusing on why we're really here." Jake finally looked at her. "What if solving this puzzle is exactly why we're here? Lirelei said my quest might teach us about cooperation." "Maybe she's right." Dr. Voss sighed. "Or maybe she's just entertaining herself by watching you fail." Jake didn't answer. He gathered his notes and headed for the docking bay. He had asked Commander Zara 9 to meet him at the station's research library. The Nexus Hub's library was enormous. Books, data crystals, and holographic records from hundreds of worlds filled chambers that seemed to stretch on forever. Jake found Commander Zara 9 waiting for him in the linguistics section. Her crystal body glowed with soft blue light. "Human." "Jake," she said in her musical voice, "have you made progress?" "Some," Jake said. "I learned that Elven names are mathematical formulas. But I don't understand the math yet." Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted to excited yellow. "This is why I wish to help. My people excel at mathematical analysis. Show me what you have." "Learned." Jake spread out his notes on a table. Each syllable in an elven name represents a different aspect of the person: birth circumstances, family history, personal achievements, spiritual connections. The sounds themselves create harmonics that somehow describe the individual. Fascinating. Commander Zara 9 studied the notes. Like a quantum signature encoded in audio frequencies. But how do the patterns combine? That's what I can't figure out, Jake admitted. And I only have 2 days left. They spent the morning working together. Commander Zara 9's quantum computational abilities let her analyze sound patterns in ways Jake never could. But even her advanced processing couldn't crack the deeper mysteries of elven naming. The mathematics are incredibly complex, she said during a break. Each name appears to be unique, following patterns that adjust based on countless variables. It would take years to decode the system. Jake felt his hopes sinking. So, it really is impossible? Perhaps not. Commander Zara 9's patterns brightened. I have been thinking about what you said yesterday. You noticed details others missed. The way Lyrelai moves, her expressions, her choice of words. Maybe the answer isn't in ancient texts, but in direct observation. That afternoon, Jake returned to the diplomatic meetings with new purpose. Instead of just listening to the negotiations, he watched Lyrelai carefully. He noticed that she touched her throat when she was thinking deeply. She smiled differently when she was genuinely happy versus when she was being polite. When she was frustrated, she spoke more slowly, putting extra emphasis on certain sounds. The negotiations themselves were still stuck. The three species argued about extraction methods, environmental protection, and profit sharing. But Jake began to see patterns in how Lyrelai responded to different ideas. When Captain Rodriguez suggested a human mining technique, Lyrelai's expression stayed neutral. When Commander Zara 9 proposed Vex-high efficiency protocols, Lyrelai looked slightly disapproving. But when Jake suggested they study the crystal formations first to understand how they grew naturally, Lyrelai's eyes lit up. Understanding before action, she said. This shows wisdom. During the dinner break, Jake approached Lyrelai directly. Can I ask you something personal? You may ask, she said with a small smile. I may not answer. Why do you care so much about preserving the crystal formations? I mean, beyond the environmental reasons. Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment. They were standing on an observation deck overlooking one of the station's gardens. Below them, plants from dozens of worlds grew together in impossible harmony. When I was young, she said finally, only 50 years old by my people's measure, I watched my homeworld's crystal forests being harvested by traders. They took everything in 10 years. Thousands of years of growth, gone in a decade. The harmony of my childhood was replaced by empty caverns and dead stone. Jake felt something click in his mind. Your true name has something to do with that loss, doesn't it? Lyrelai turned to look at him, and for a moment her careful composure slipped. You are more perceptive than I expected. Loss and growth, Jake said, thinking out loud. Destruction and preservation. That's part of who you are. Perhaps, Lyrelai said. But knowing themes is not the same as knowing the name itself. That evening, Jake met with Commander Zara 9 again. He told her about his conversation with Lyrelai. Emotional connections, Commander Zara 9 mused. My people often overlook these in our calculations. You think her name reflects personal experiences rather than just cultural formulas? Both, Jake said. The cultural part provides the structure, but her personal experiences fill in the details. They worked late into the night combining Commander Zara 9's computational power with Jake's growing understanding of Lyrelai's personality. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. Her name likely begins with syllables meaning one who preserves, Commander Zara 9 calculated. But the middle sections would be more personal. Jake thought about everything he had observed. She's not just about preservation. She's about finding balance between old and new, between taking and giving back. And she seeks understanding, Commander Zara 9 added. Notice how she responds when someone truly listens to her. She's lonely, Jake realized. That's why she issued the challenge. She wants someone to know her well enough to speak her true name, not as a conquest, but as recognition of who she really is. Commander Zara 9's patterns pulsed with warm light. You begin to understand, but understanding and knowing are different things. Can you translate that understanding into the mathematical precision of an elven name? Jake stared at their notes. Mathematical formulas, sound frequencies, and cultural patterns covered 3 data pads. But somewhere in all that complexity was a simple truth about a person who had lived for centuries and was still learning about herself. I need to talk to her again, Jake said. Not as someone trying to solve a puzzle, but as someone who wants to understand a friend. The next morning brought the final day of negotiations. Time was running out for both the mining rights and Jake's challenge. The 3 species were no closer to agreement, and tensions were starting to rise. But Jake noticed something new in Lyrale's behavior. When she looked at him, her expression was softer. When he spoke during the meetings, she listened more carefully. It was as if his quest to understand her true name was changing how she saw him. Dr. Voss pulled him aside during a break. I hate to admit this, but I think you might be on to something. She's been watching you differently, like she's starting to trust you. Trust, Jake repeated. That's part of it too. Her name isn't just about what she's experienced. It's about what she hopes for. That afternoon, while the others argued about technical details, Jake made a decision. He stood up and addressed the room. I think we're approaching this wrong, he said. We're trying to divide resources instead of sharing knowledge. What if we work together on the mining project? Each species contributes their strengths, and everyone benefits. Captain Rodriguez looked surprised. Commander Zara 9's patterns brightened with interest. But Lyrale smiled, the first genuine smile Jake had seen from her in days. Cooperation over competition, she said. This is what your people could teach the galaxy, Jake Morrison. The wisdom to see connections where others see only divisions. As she spoke, Jake heard something in her voice, a musical quality that went beyond mere words. The way she said certain syllables, the rhythm of her speech, the harmony between sounds. It wasn't just language, it was music, it was mathematics. It was her. For the first time since accepting the challenge, Jake felt confident he was on the right path. He had one night left to put all the pieces together. One night to prove that understanding someone meant more than just knowing facts about them. Outside the station's windows, the Nexium crystals floated in space like captured stars, waiting to see what tomorrow would bring. Jake spent his final night in the station's observatory watching the Nexium crystals float in the darkness beyond. Commander Zara 9 sat beside him, her crystal body glowing softly in the dim light. You are troubled, she observed. The deadline approaches. I feel close, Jake said, but close isn't enough. I need to be exact. They had worked for hours, analyzing every conversation Jake had recorded with Lyrale. Commander Zara 9's quantum processing abilities had identified patterns in her speech, mathematical relationships, between the sounds she emphasized and even the harmonic frequencies of her laughter. Your approach has been correct, Commander Zara 9 said, understanding the person before attempting to guess the name. But elven names require absolute precision. One wrong syllable, and the entire name becomes meaningless. Jake pulled out his notes one more time. He had filled 17 pages with observations, calculations, and theories. Somewhere in all that information was the key to Lyrale's true name. Tell me what you know for certain, Commander Zara 9 suggested. Jake organized his thoughts. Her name starts with syllables meaning one who seeks, or one who preserves. The middle section relates to her personal history, loss, growth, the balance between taking and giving back. The final part connects to her hopes for the future. And the mathematical structure? Elven names follow harmonic progressions. Each syllable builds on the previous ones, creating a sound pattern that describes the whole person. Jake paused. But there's something else. Her name isn't static. It's been growing and changing as she lives new experiences. Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted to bright yellow. Explain this theory. When she talks about her childhood, she uses certain sounds repeatedly. When she discusses her diplomatic work, different sounds emerge. And when she talks about the future, about cooperation and understanding, there are new harmonic elements. You think her interactions with us have added new components to her name? Jake nodded excitedly. That's why she said she'd been giving me clues since we met. Not just clues about her existing name, but clues about how her name is evolving through our conversations. Commander Zara 9 was quiet for several minutes, processing this theory through her quantum computational systems. Finally, her patterns turned a warm gold color. Fascinating. If correct, this means solving the puzzle requires not just understanding who she was, but recognizing who she is becoming. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. She's not just testing whether someone can know her past. She wants to see if someone can recognize her growth. They worked through the night, building a new model of Lyralay's name. Commander Zara 9 calculated the mathematical relationships, while Jake focused on the emotional and experiential components. As dawn approached, they had something that felt right. The name has 4 main sections, Jake said, reviewing their work. Birth and heritage, personal trials and growth, current purpose and wisdom, and future aspirations. And each section follows specific harmonic rules, Commander Zara 9 added. The sounds must flow together like a song describing her entire existence. Jake practiced pronouncing the name they had constructed. The syllables felt strange, but somehow right, like a melody he had always known but never heard. When the time came for the final negotiation session, Jake entered the meeting hall with nervous confidence. The 3 delegations took their usual seats, but the tension in the room was different. This was the last day. Decisions had to be made. Captain Rodriguez opened the meeting. We've talked for 3 days about mining rights, but we're no closer to agreement. Perhaps it's time to consider that this partnership isn't possible. Commander Zara 9's patterns flashed red. My government will not accept failure. We need those crystals. And we will not accept the destruction of irreplaceable formations, Lyralay said firmly. Some things matter more than profit. Jake watched. The argument began again, but his attention was focused on Lyralay. Today she seemed different, more relaxed but also expectant. She kept glancing at him as if wondering what he had learned. Finally, during a heated exchange about extraction quotas, Jake stood up. I'd like to make my attempt now, he said. The room fell silent. Dr. Voss looked nervous. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. Commander Zara 9's patterns brightened with anticipation. Lyralay rose gracefully from her seat. Very well, Jake Morrison. You have studied and struggled. You have sought to understand rather than simply to conquer. Tell me, what is my true name? Jake took a deep breath. Everything depended on the next few moments. Not just his personal challenge, but possibly the entire negotiation between their 3 species. Your name tells the story of who you are and who you're becoming, he began. It starts with your heritage as one who preserves ancient wisdom. He spoke the first syllables, sounds that meant keeper of old knowledge, in the most formal Elven dialect. Lyralay's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. The second part reflects your personal journey, Jake continued. Loss and renewal, watching destruction and choosing to build instead. The middle syllables flowed from his mouth, sounds that Commander Zara 9 had calculated to represent transformation through adversity. The third section is about your current purpose, seeking understanding between different peoples, finding harmony where others see only conflict. These syllables were newer additions to her name, reflecting her role as a diplomat and bridge builder. And the final part, Jake said, his voice growing stronger, represents your hope for the future. Not just preservation of what was, but growth toward what could be. Cooperation, understanding, connection across the spaces between worlds. He spoke the last syllables, sounds that had emerged from their own conversations, mathematical harmonies that described dreams of unity. When he finished, the complete name hung in the air like music. Every syllable connected to the next, creating a sound pattern that seemed to describe not just a person, but an aspiration. Lyralay stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then, slowly, tears began to form in her green eyes. How? She whispered. How did you hear the new parts? Because they're still being written, Jake said gently. Your name isn't finished. It's growing as you grow, changing as you change. The conversations we've had, the hope you found in human curiosity, the friendship you've built with Commander Zara 9, all of that has become part of who you are. Lyreley walked around the table until she stood directly in front of Jake. You spoke my name perfectly. Not just the sounds, but the meaning behind them. You heard the song of my existence. Does that mean I win? Jake asked. Lyreley smiled through her tears. Yes, Jake Morrison. You have won, but not in the way you might expect. She turned to address the entire room. This human has taught me something important. True understanding requires seeing someone not as they were, but as they are becoming. Our negotiations have failed because we see each other as fixed entities with unchangeable positions. She gestured to Commander Zara 9. The Vexahai value efficiency, but they also value innovation and adaptation. They could learn new approaches. She looked at Captain Rodriguez. Humans need resources, but they also need allies and knowledge. They could gain more than they give. Finally, she placed her hand over her heart. And elves preserve wisdom. But wisdom includes learning when to change. Perhaps our ancient methods could evolve. Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted through a rainbow of colors. You propose that our positions, like your name, are not fixed but growing? Exactly, Lyreley said. Jake solved my puzzle not by finding the right answer, but by understanding that the answer was still being created. Perhaps our solution to the mining dispute requires the same approach. Jake felt a rush of understanding. We're not just negotiating over resources. We're creating new relationships, new ways of working together. Dr. Voss, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke up. A joint research project, human adaptability, Vex-high technology, and elven wisdom working together to develop new mining techniques that preserve while extracting. Partnership instead of competition, Captain Rodriguez said slowly. Share the knowledge as well as the resources. Commander Zara 9's patterns settled into warm gold. This approach has mathematical elegance. Cooperation creates more value than conflict. Lyreley turned back to Jake. You have indeed guessed my name correctly, but you have also shown me something more valuable than any puzzle solution. You have shown me that understanding someone means helping them become who they are meant to be. Jake felt his heart racing. So what happens now? The marriage proposal? Lyreley laughed, that musical sound that had captivated him from the beginning. Oh, my dear human friend, you still have much to learn about elven customs. Marriage proposals given as challenges are symbolic. You have won my respect, my friendship, and my trust. These are far more valuable than any formal bond. Relief and disappointment warred in Jake's chest. But looking at Lyreley's radiant smile and Commander Zara 9's glowing patterns, he realized he had gained something better than he had originally hoped for. He had gained true allies. The final day of negotiations had become the first day of a new kind of partnership, one built on understanding rather than conquest. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Once the three species agreed to work together instead of against each other, solutions appeared everywhere. Dr. Voss and the Vex-high scientists began designing new extraction methods. Captain Rodriguez and the elven diplomats worked out resource-sharing agreements. Jake found himself in the middle of it all, translating not just languages but ideas and approaches. But the biggest change was in how they saw each other. Commander Zara 9 no longer spoke of efficiency above all else. She talked about sustainable optimization and long-term partnership protocols. The elves stopped treating the humans and Vex-high as impatient children and began sharing advanced techniques they had guarded for centuries. The humans contributed their gift for finding creative solutions to impossible problems. As evening approached, Jake stood once again on the observatory deck, watching the Nexium crystals gleaming in space. Tomorrow, teams from all three species would begin studying them together. But tonight, he needed time to think about everything that had happened. You look thoughtful, Lyreley said, joining him at the window. I'm trying to figure out what I learned, Jake admitted. 3 days ago, I thought success meant guessing your name and winning your hand in marriage. Now I realize that was never really the point. What was the point? She asked gently. Jake considered his words carefully. The point was proving that understanding someone is more important than conquering them. That friendship is more valuable than possession. That growth matters more than victory. Lorelei smiled. And what did you discover about yourself in the process? That I'm better at understanding people than I thought. That working with others makes me stronger than working alone. And that sometimes the best way to win is to change what winning means. Commander Zara 9 approached them, her crystal body glowing with warm colors. Jake Morrison, I have been calculating the probabilities of our mission's success. 3 days ago, the chances of meaningful cooperation were less than 12%. Now they exceed 85%. Your actions created this change. Our actions, Jake corrected. I couldn't have solved the name puzzle without your computational help. And the negotiation breakthrough happened because all three of us learned to see each other differently. True, Commander Zara 9 agreed. Cooperation multiplies individual capabilities. This is a valuable equation. Dr. Voss found them a few minutes later, carrying a data pad filled with preliminary research plans. Jake, I owe you an apology. I thought you were wasting time on romantic nonsense, but your distraction just saved our entire mission. How so? Jake asked. The joint research project we're planning will give us access to technology and knowledge, worth 100 times more than simple mining rights. Plus, we're building relationships that could reshape how our species interact for centuries. She paused, looking out at the crystals. I still think the marriage challenge was crazy, but crazy in the best possible way. As the days passed, Jake watched the partnership take shape. Human engineers worked alongside Vex-High mathematicians to design extraction tools that followed Elven harmony principles. Elven historians shared ancient knowledge about crystal formation with human geologists. Vex-High strategic planners helped everyone think about long-term consequences. Jake's role evolved too. He became the unofficial liaison between the three groups, not because he had special authority, but because he had proven he could understand different perspectives and find common ground. 2 weeks after the original deadline, Jake received an unexpected message. The Galactic Council had heard about the successful three-way partnership and wanted to invite him to mediate a dispute between 5 other species. You're becoming famous, Captain Rodriguez told him, the human who can solve impossible cultural puzzles. But Jake wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in the work itself, in the challenge of helping different peoples understand each other. On their last day at Nexus Hub, the 3 delegations held a celebration dinner. The main hall was decorated with symbols from all 3 cultures, human jazz music mixed with Elven harmonies and Vex-High crystal tones, creating something entirely new but somehow familiar. Jake sat between Lorelei and Commander Zara 9, watching. Representatives from dozens of species mingle and talk. Many had come specifically to learn about the successful partnership. You know, Lorelei said quietly, when I issued that challenge, I expected you to fail. Most species give up after a few hours of research. What made the difference? Jake asked. You listened to me, not just to solve a puzzle, but because you genuinely wanted to understand who I was. She paused, watching the celebration around them. That kind of attention is rare, even among my own people. Commander Zara 9's patterns shifted to thoughtful, blue. Your success has changed my understanding of human capabilities. My government initially saw your species as useful but limited. Now we recognize humans as valuable partners in ways we had not calculated. Jake felt a warm glow of satisfaction, but also responsibility. This is just the beginning. There are hundreds of species in the galaxy who don't understand each other. Imagine what we could accomplish if more of them learned to cooperate. An interesting long-term project, Commander Zara 9 mused. Building bridges between civilizations instead of barriers. Lorelei raised her glass of elven wine. To Jake Morrison, who taught us that the best way to win a challenge is to change what the challenge means. They drank, and Jake felt the weight of future possibilities. Tomorrow, the Starbound would leave for Earth, carrying news of humanity's first major interstellar alliance. But Jake had been offered a new position, permanent cultural liaison at Nexus Hub, helping other species find common ground. The decision was easy. 3 months later, Jake stood in his new office overlooking the station's central plaza. His walls were covered with translation guides, cultural notes, and photographs from successful mediations. In the past month alone, he had helped resolve conflicts between crystal-based life forms and energy beings, negotiated trade agreements between aquatic and desert species, and established communication protocols for a race that spoke entirely in mathematical equations. Each challenge was different, but the approach was always the same. Listen first, understand before judging, look for common ground instead of differences. And remember that every species was still growing and changing. His door chimed and Lyrelei entered with a data pad. "Your next assignment," she said with a smile. 6 species claiming ownership of the same solar system. They've been fighting for 50 years. "Any of them willing to talk?" Jake asked. "They agreed to meet only because they've heard about the human who solves impossible problems." Lyrelei's eyes twinkled with amusement. "No pressure." Jake took the datapad and began reading about the 6 species. Each had legitimate historical claims to the system. Each had been hurt by the others. Each believed compromise was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge he had come to love. "When do we start?" he asked. "Tomorrow. Commander Zara 9 is already analyzing their cultural matrices. She's quite excited about the mathematical complexities involved." Jake grinned. His friendship with both Lyrelei and Commander Zara 9 had become one of the most rewarding parts of his new life. They had formed an unofficial team, combining human intuition, elven wisdom, and Vexa high analytical power to tackle increasingly complex diplomatic challenges. "You know," Jake said, 6 months ago I was just a translator trying not to embarrass humanity at our first major diplomatic meeting. Now I'm mediating conflicts that have lasted longer than human civilization." "And you love every minute of it," Lyrelei observed. Jake nodded. "I never knew work could feel like this. Like every day I'm helping to make the galaxy a little bit smaller, a little bit more connected." "This is what humans do best," Lyrelei said. "You see isolation and imagine community. You encounter differences and look for similarities. You meet strangers and make them friends." Through his office window, Jake could see ships from dozens of worlds docking at Nexus Hub. Each carried beings with their own languages, customs, fears, and hopes. Each represented a potential bridge to be built or a misunderstanding to be resolved. The galaxy was vast and full of differences that seemed impossible to reconcile. But Jake had learned something important during his quest to guess an elven name. The impossible became possible when you changed your approach from conquest to understanding, from winning to connecting. He picked up his translation device and headed for the door. 6 species were waiting for someone to help them see past their old grudges and find a new way forward. Jake Morrison, the human who had won a challenge by changing what it meant to win, was ready for his next impossible task. Outside his window, the Nexium crystals continued to sparkle in space, now being carefully harvested by joint teams from 3 species who had learned that cooperation created more value than competition. They served as a daily reminder that even the most ancient conflicts could be resolved when people chose understanding over victory. The galaxy was still vast and full of differences, but it was getting a little smaller, one conversation at a time.